I got back from deployment thinking the hardest part was over. And then I saw it: fresh gravel, brand new landscaping, and a full-on community clubhouse sitting behind my house like it had always been there. Right in front, a big sign, HOA Members Only. Except that building wasn't on common area. It was on my land. I'm Ryan Carter. Army. 15 months out, a couple of flights, one long drive, and all I wanted was my own bed and quiet. No alarms, no schedules, no voices in my ear. Cedar Ridge Meadows looked the same from the street. Same trimmed lawns, same matching mailboxes, same welcome home stone sign like it was trying too hard. But the second I pulled into my driveway, something felt off. Not in a ghost story way, more like the neighborhood had been busy while I was gone, and nobody bothered to tell me. I walked inside, dropped my bag, stood there for a minute just breathing, letting the house smell like my house again. Then I went straight to the back patio, because I needed air. That's when I heard voices, laughter, a car door, from behind my property line. I stepped into the yard and stared out toward the tree line behind my lot. And there it was, a building I had never seen in my life. It wasn't small, it wasn't temporary, it was a real clubhouse, roofline, windows, porch lights, the kind of place people host wine night and pretend they're friends. There was a crushed stone parking area. There were solar path lights. There were fresh mulch beds, like someone had landscaped my backyard without asking. I walked closer, slower, because part of my brain still couldn't accept what my eyes were saying. Then I saw the sign again, big letters, bold, confident. HOA Members Only, like I was the one trespassing. I didn't start yelling. Not yet. I did the first thing a tired, stubborn, paperwork-trained soldier does. I went inside and grabbed my closing binder. Deed, survey, plat map. All the boring stuff people toss into a drawer and forget until their life depends on it. I spread everything out on the kitchen table, and the more I checked, the uglier it got. My lot wasn't a neat rectangle like most of the homes in Cedar Ridge Meadows. Mine was one of the larger corner properties, and it stretched back into that wooded edge. That was the reason I bought it: privacy. Space. Quiet. The clubhouse sat right in that stretch, so I did what you do when you're trying not to lose it. I grabbed my keys, walked to my truck, and drove to the Homeowners Association office before my coffee even finished cooling. Their office was one of those little community management setups near the entrance. Fake plants, brochure rack, inspirational poster about harmony. I walked in, and a woman behind the desk looked up like I was there to complain about someone's trash cans. Her name tag said Tina Morales. "Hi, can I help you?" she said, all bright and trained. I slid my folder onto the counter. "I just got home from deployment," I told her, "and your HOA built a clubhouse on my property." She blinked once like her brain didn't have a category for that sentence. "I'm sorry," she said. I leaned in slightly, calm voice, tight jaw. "Behind my house, there's a building, there's a sign, and it's inside my boundary." Tina's face went from customer service to actual concern. "Sir, that clubhouse is on common area." I opened the folder and pointed to the survey. "No, it's not." She took the papers, looked down, and her mouth tightened in that way people do when they realize a problem just became their problem. She disappeared into the back, came out 5 minutes later with a binder, and started flipping like her life depended on it. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "This was approved by the board," she muttered. "By the president." "Name," I said. She hesitated. "Melissa Hart." Of course it was Melissa. If you've ever lived in a neighborhood with an HOA, you know there's always one person who treats that little volunteer title like it's a federal appointment. Melissa Hart was that person. She didn't suggest. She issued. She didn't ask. She notified. She had that tone where every sentence sounded like it came with a fine attached. Tina tried to get ahead of it. She said she verified the boundary. Verified how, I asked. Tina didn't answer because she already knew the answer was going to sound stupid out loud. That evening there was an emergency board meeting scheduled. I showed up with my folder and a level of patience I didn't actually feel. The meeting room was inside the clubhouse itself, which, let me tell you, is a special kind of insult. Walking into a building that shouldn't exist, to argue with the people who built it, while they sit in folding chairs like they own the air. Melissa Hart stood at the front like she was running a courtroom. Blonde hair pulled tight, crisp blouse, smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ryan," she said like we were old friends. "Welcome home. Thank you for your service." That was the first tactic wrapped the knife in a flag. I didn't sit. "Melissa," I said, "why is your clubhouse on my land?" Her smile never moved. "It's not," she said. "It's on Homeowners Association common property. We verified using the neighborhood plat." I held up my survey. "This is my deed and my survey from closing. The structure is inside my boundary." Melissa waved a hand like paperwork was just an opinion. "Plat maps are legally recorded," she said. "They're sufficient." I tilted my head. "Are you a licensed surveyor?" A few people shifted in their chairs. Melissa's eyes narrowed just slightly. "I don't need to be," she said. "The board did due diligence." I let that hang for a second. Then I said it slow, clear, and loud enough for everyone to understand. "You spent tens of thousands building a structure without commissioning an actual survey. And you're telling me that's due diligence?" Melissa's voice sharpened. "We had every reason to believe." "No," I cut in. "You had every reason to ask, and you didn't." She tried to pivot into authority. "Ryan, you cannot restrict access to community amenities. Doing so may violate—" I laughed once short and humorless. "Don't threaten me with the bylaws while you're standing on my property." The room went quiet. Not dramatic quiet, more like uncomfortable quiet. The kind where people start realizing they backed the wrong person. But Melissa didn't back down. She doubled down. She insisted it was common area. She insisted the board had authority. She acted like if she said it enough times, reality would change. And for a couple days, it almost felt like she might win by sheer audacity. The clubhouse stayed open. Cars kept parking on that gravel lot. People kept walking back there like it was normal. I'd stand at my kitchen window watching strangers stroll through a space that was supposed to be mine. They weren't evil. They were just unaware. And that made it worse. Because while Melissa played president, I was the guy who looked like he was picking a fight with the neighborhood. I didn't sleep much that week. Not because I was scared, because my brain wouldn't shut off. I'd just gotten home. I was exhausted. And now I was facing the kind of conflict that doesn't end quickly, the kind that bleeds into every day. At one point, sitting at my table at 2 a.m., staring at those documents, I felt something I didn't expect. Not fear, just heavy. The thought hit me. Maybe the easiest thing is to let them cut a check. Apologize, and I move on. Maybe I don't have the energy for a full legal war the second I get home. And that's the dangerous part. Not the yelling, not the threats. The moment you start bargaining with your own boundaries because you're tired. But the next morning I walked out back again and I saw fresh tire tracks in the gravel they'd laid. And I watched someone's kid throw a football 10 feet from my tree line like it was their backyard. And something in me clicked. If I let this slide, it doesn't stop here. It becomes a pattern. So I did the one thing Melissa couldn't argue with. I hired a licensed surveyor. 2 days later, Paul Henderson from Henderson Land Surveying showed up with GPS equipment and stakes. He wasn't emotional. He wasn't angry. He was just precise. He measured. He marked. He documented. And then he handed me the report. The clubhouse sat 78 feet inside my property line. Not maybe. Not kind of. 78 feet. The parking area pushed even further. The landscaping. All of it. On my land. With that report, I requested another board meeting. This time I didn't get smiles. I got tight faces and forced politeness. Melissa showed up still pretending she was in charge, but the energy was different. The other board members wouldn't look at her the same. I placed the surveyor's report on the table, and I watched their eyes scan the page like they were reading their own sentencing. Melissa tried to speak first. "I'm sure we can resolve this amicably." I held up my hand. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You have 2 options. Option 1. You remove the structure, restore the land, and cover the cost of remediation. Option 2. You admit you built on private property, and you lease the land from me." Melissa's voice jumped. "A lease is absurd. This is a community amenity." I stared at her. "Then you should have built it on community land?" One of the board members, Mark Sullivan, finally turned to Melissa. "You told us you verified everything he said, low and sharp. You said it was cleared." Melissa snapped. "It was based on the plat." Mark cut her off. "That's not what we asked." There it was, the first real crack. I still didn't celebrate. Because cracks don't win cases. Paper does. That afternoon I met with a real estate attorney named Adam Price. He didn't do drama, he did outcomes. He looked at the survey, looked at the board's emails, looked at the timeline. Then he leaned back and said, "They trespassed, improved the property, and used it as a facility. You have leverage." "What do I do?" I asked. He shrugged. "You decide if you want them to tear it down or if you want them to pay you." I thought about it for half a second. I didn't want months of demolition noise. I didn't want my yard dug up again. And honestly, I wanted them to feel the cost of what they did every time they held a meeting in that building. So we drafted a lease, real terms, real liability, real money, insurance requirements, indemnification, maintenance responsibilities. No oops, honest mistake escape hatch. When we brought it to the board, their faces went pale. Because suddenly, this wasn't Melissa's little power game. This was a contract. They tried to argue budget. They tried to talk about dues. They tried to tell me it was unfair. And I said the simplest thing I'd said the entire time. Fair doesn't move property lines. After 3 rounds of negotiations, they signed $1,200 a month, paid quarterly, lease recorded with the county, $2 million in liability coverage with me named as additional insured. The first payment cleared a week later. And the very next board meeting, Melissa Hart was removed as president. No big speech, no dramatic walkout. Just a vote of quiet resignation and a woman realizing she couldn't bully her way through a surveyor's stake. The last time I saw her near that clubhouse, she didn't look at me. She didn't smile. She just walked past the sign like it suddenly embarrassed her. And that's where this story ends right there. Because the moment she lost that chair, the neighborhood finally understood what she'd done. Lesson paper beats power every time.